Welcome to ChariTea and Biscuits, a series of open and honest conversations with those who work in and with the charity sector. Emma, Willder and guests will discuss the issues affecting small UK charities, highlight great resources, and welcome listeners to a wider community of people in the know. Hit the subscribe button now and stay tuned for real behind-the-scenes chat.
Hello and welcome to this edition of ChariTea and Biscuits. I'm joined today by Deb Topping from DTInfoGov, and they provide support, consultancy and training for all aspects of information legislation. Deb and I met quite a few years ago now through Freelance Heroes, and she's actually come and done some work for Beyond Profit, and she's actually helped quite a few of my clients. And what I thought would be really useful today is to talk about what is data governance and what small charities need to know, because I know a lot of the time people end up panicking. So, Deb, what is data governance?
Oh dear, yeah. So it takes many forms, but especially for the charities, and that it's really understanding what information you have. So what data you have, understanding why you've got it, and understanding how you can manage it better. So it is about thinking. I always think the why, what, where. First of all, yeah. So it's that thinking about why are we collecting information? Why do we need it? And understanding that will be the first point of call. Where are you collecting it as well? You need to understand as part of your governance processes, where are you connecting it? Where are you, do you have a contact us form on a website? Do you have referral forms that you're collecting? How are you managing those?
Gift aid forms, for example.
Gift aid forms is a big one, yeah, and links to as well. If you've got, especially if you're a charity that's got a shop and you've got volunteers working in that shop, what are you telling the volunteers about when they're collecting information about gift aid? And how is it being transferred from the shop to your systems? So what's the process there? So data governance covers a big picture, but it can be manageable for small charities. It doesn't have to be an industry.
And I think that's really important, isn't it? A lot of people hear the word data governance, they immediately go GDPR, data protection. Oh my God, we can't do that. What do we need to do? And they panic. And actually, I really like the way you've outlined those three steps. And I think that would be a good starting point, wouldn't it, for most charities, just to understand that to begin with.
Yeah, I always think you can't have good governance for anything if you don't know what you're doing or what you've got. So it is about understanding, what information do you actually need to deliver the service that you're providing to your service users and your clients? How can you collect it in a safe and secure way? And then how long do we need to keep it for? Why are we keeping it? Because if you keep it longer, you've got to manage it more, which leads to more problems later on. So we want to keep it down to what we need, the minimum that we need to do to deliver the service, really, and provide the support that we as charities do provide. So.
And when you've worked with charities, what things have you come across? Can you give any examples?
So one of the big things with charities, I think, is email management. Especially if you've got boards of trustees, you've got maybe volunteers and staff, and it's thinking about emails. Do we need to copy every trustee into every email? So we duplicate it umpteen times. And if we do reply, do we need to keep all the chain of email in the reply, or can we get rid of some of the chain? Can we reduce it? So email management, I think, is a big problem.
I think that reply email as well, because I think sometimes people forget that if you do reply, people can generally see everything further down the chain. And there might be stuff you don't want people to see.
Yeah, there might be, but also it makes the emails bigger and bigger, and eventually you will be getting to the point where you've got just duplicates, or you've written, or more, whatever the term is for more than two. You're replicating it many times, and you don't need that. You only need the last in the chain. So why are you keeping the rest? It makes your mailbox far easier to manage. And why are we doing reply to all?
Don't get me started on reply to all. It's one of my biggest bugbears, because sometimes when I get to think, why do I need to know that? And I think a lot of people do it, and let's just be honest, they do it as an arse covering exercise.
Yeah.
There, I've said it. You know it's true. I know it's true. But actually, I'm quite careful when I do an email. I think, actually, does this person really need to know this?
And especially if you've got trustees, hopefully charities are able to provide trustees with a charity email account, for example, and not a private email account. That would be the ideal. But if they're using their private or personal email accounts, you do need to be careful what you're sharing to those accounts. And same with volunteers. You know, it's sort of like making sure as well that we've told the trustees and the volunteers especially, and our staff, what we expect about confidentiality. No.
I think that's really important. So one of the charities I work with, actually an standing item on every agenda item, we have welcome, apologies, declarations of interest, next GDPR reminder. And that's just a brief reminder to all trustees that if you've got it in paper copy and you don't need it, shred it. If it's on an email copy and you don't need it, delete it. And it's just that regular reminder.
Yeah. Go on. One of the other things that I thought about in terms of emails is just bear in mind the email systems. Most of them you can put to CC and BCC, and it's that BCC because the regulator, who is the Information Commissioner for Data Protection, especially personal data, has fined charities for putting names, email addresses of their clients in the to field. So a charity in Scotland was fined £10,000. So use the blind copy and then they can't see, especially if you're a charity that deals with more sensitive support services.
And I think also people don't always realise that email addresses are personal data.
Yeah.
Especially personal email addresses. So I think that's a key thing for anyone to take out this. Personal email addresses are personal data.
Yeah. Go on.
And volunteers, I mean, I think trustees, yes, volunteers, how would you go around reminding volunteers? Because a lot of charities think, oh, the volunteers are doing us a favour, we really don't want to be putting this on them and that on them.
I think it's a common sense approach. I always try and encourage people to take that common sense approach. Let's not try and create, like a very formal, very industry based approach, because that will put people off. They won't want to do it. So, but have that, general conversation when they're coming to join you as a volunteer. Have that conversation about. So we just need to have a reminder that we will be dealing with, if you're collecting gift aid when you're out for us, and the details for gift aid. I'm writing on my hand. The details.
I know exactly what you're doing now.
The details for gift aid. Then just bear in mind, do it quietly. Don't shout it out loudly in the shop or the reception area. Wherever you are, do it quietly. Make sure that you put it away safely. And it's just having that conversation. It's not saying and sign on the dotted line, although that would be lovely. Like a confidentiality agreement sort of thing, and sign on the dotted line. And bigger organizations, charities do that, but for smaller ones, have that conversation. It's don't make it. And then if you've got a record of the name and address of the volunteer, mark down, a bit like an induction for staff, mark down that you've had a conversation about confidentiality. You can't sack them, volunteers, but you can actually if there is something that happens and they don't sort of follow your sort of guidance, really, then it is a case of having to think, are they suited right for your charity, sort of thing. But having that record that you've spoken to them, that's what you need.
One thing I really like about the approach you take is it is very practical and scaled and pragmatic, actually, recognizing that larger charities have larger resources that they can throw at this, but smaller charities still have the same issues, and there's just certain things that they need to think about, like you said about the volunteers, and ideally the trustees having their own email addresses. I mean, one of the things I do is password protect documents, and don't send the password in the same email.
No, I've seen that. Seriously, I've seen that. We'll send the document off in the email to the email address, and then we'll send the password 2 seconds later to the same email address, and it's the wrong email address. So I've seen that. Yeah. Text message or ask them to ring you or something like that, at least, and then you can check some information when they do ring, if they do. But text messages, is useful. But yeah. For charities as well, a simple step they can take to help with governance is making sure that they've got that security in place. So if they keep paper records, making sure that they're in a cabinet, then in an office that the public don't go in, or other people can't. physical security is as important as electronic security.
And I think a lot of smaller charities are still on that digital journey. So I've spoken to Bobby Robson from Be More Digital recently about digital and how people panic about digital, a bit like they panic about data governance actually.
Yeah.
And then how it is just simple steps. But you're so right about the paper. I mean, I'm trying to encourage a lot of our clients to go more electronic based, just because one, paper, you have to store it, and two, it can be secure, but as long as you do the right things with the electronic stuff, that can be a lot more secure.
And also with the electronic, especially where if people are using one of the big providers for services that we all know about, then they will be doing backups as well. They will have something in place so that if something goes wrong in one part of their business, their centers where they're storing your information, that they can be moved swiftly. They can reload it in somewhere else for you. They do that as part of your license fee. And if you're looking at specific software that you're buying for charities, and I know there's recently been helping a charity look at some due diligence on, is this the right software for us? Is it safe and secure? Where are they storing the data for us? That sort of thing. Then just understanding that, and it's not the biggest job. It's, a few questions, maybe looking at information on the software supplier's website, things like that. It doesn't have to be, a massive 3-week job and we can't sign the contracts until. It's about understanding and assessing the risk. And are you happy with that?
Yeah, I was about to say, it's where is the information held, because people sign up for lots of things. And most things are cloud-based and online at the moment, and they don't think, oh, where's that information being held?
Yeah. So for personal data, there's quite a bit of legislation around, and I think most people now are familiar with GDPR.
I think most people panic when they hear GDPR.
And then data protection. We've had data protection acts since 1984, so it's nothing new. It's just a bit more well known now. That's probably GDPR sort of shone a light on it all, really, I think, when it came in. But it's things such as, and if you're using one of the big providers for your cloud services, then often it's stored in the EU, and there's appropriate agreements in place between the EU and the UK. That's fine. You're not going to, and they do get audited by government departments and things like that, so they're fairly good. Things such people need to be aware of for charities is, if it's a smaller software company, are they themselves using some storage, maybe in America or another country? And if it's not in the EU, and it's just a simple question to them, where do you store the data? It's not an industry. Where do you store the data? If they say the EU or the UK, great. If they say America, then it maybe just needs a couple more questions, because there's no legal mechanism at the moment. There's no legal way to transfer. You have to have a lot of contract clauses and that. So it's just understanding that. But they should be taking it in place. So.
And are there any other hints and tips you think would be useful for small charities?
I think about if they're using marketing or mailing lists.
Yes.
Yeah, just being mindful. If they are doing mailing, and there are some big products out there that will help with your mailing lists and doing your newsletters and things like that. And it's a great idea to raise awareness for charities. But it's just being mindful that I'll give you an example. If somebody makes a donation to the charity, you are legally allowed to say thank you for the donation. Polite, if nothing else, but you are allowed to say it. But you are not allowed to put marketing information in that thank you, because then it becomes a marketing email. And when they made the donation, they may not have agreed to have marketing. So it's just
getting those consents again, isn't it?
It's treading carefully. So donations without, yes, I'll have your newsletter type of thing as well. Donations on their own, just send a thank you. That's fine. But if on your website you've got, would you like to sign up to our newsletter sort of thing, and you've got a box that they can tick on the website or on the form or something like that, then you can add them to the marketing list or the mailing list, and you can manage it. And if you do take part in take one of the big services that do manage that for you, they will encourage an unsubscribe. So as long as it's an unsubscribe or a tell us you don't want it anymore type of thing, then and you manage that, and you make sure you don't send it out again if somebody has unsubscribed, there's no problems. And the big providers for the software that do this, they will manage that. If some people unsubscribe, they add it to an unsubscribed list, so they manage it for you.
Are you allowed in that, almost say if you thank somebody for a donation, are you allowed to say thank you for donation, if you'd like to hear more about us,
No.
please go to here and fill in your information?
No, that then becomes marketing.
That's another useful tip, because I reckon a lot of people do that. It's big, small charities, other organisations.
Yeah, a lot of I've been working with some hospices recently, and they obviously get donations from when people have passed, and they like to write to the families. The problem is they usually get the family email addresses from the funeral directors, so not directly from the families. So we have checked with the regulator, the Information Commissioner, and they said as long as there is always going to be an assumption that the funeral directors are telling the families they're making a donation to charity on their behalf, the collection, and they usually will tell them, we'll share your details so you can get a letter. And I did that myself when my mum passed, the donkey sanctuary, because she liked donkeys.
I think that's a lovely idea.
And so the funeral directors collected all the money in, they sent it off, and I got a letter back from the dog sanctuary saying thank you very much for your donation. And that was always in the letter. That was always in the letter, and that's what the regulator says you should do. If your headed stationery happens to have your website on it,
yes,
then
or an email signature
happens to have the website link in the bottom.
Yeah,
that's perfectly acceptable. So, but you're not allowed to be quite overt. You're not allowed to clearly say, and if you'd like to learn more about us, we have a newsletter, and if you'd like to, you're not allowed to do that in it. So,
and I think a lot of people get scared of the Information Commissioner, but having looked on the website myself, actually, there's loads of useful information.
There is
on there, and it's quite a good way to get an understanding. And also the fundraising regulator as well has loads of helpful information on there as well. So I think they're good. If you're not sure, they're probably good places to start to have a look.
And the fundraising regulator's website does contain information for different types of people that you're raising funds from. So different ways to approach them, from corporate to charitable trusts to individuals. So they do tell you how to deal with those different types, groups of people, about 5 different groups that listed. So that's really useful information. Yeah,
especially if somebody's potentially new to this, or they're not sure where to start, or they watch this and they go, oh my God, we actually do that. Oh no, we need to change that. It's good to know that there's places they can go to get that information that's not going to cost them money, essentially.
And the Information Commissioner's website, like you said, is really useful. It's got a lot of information on there. It's also got a small business and a charities section on there as well. And you can do an online self-assessment. It takes you through. But also they've got a self-assessment about whether you need to register with them.
Yes, I've done that for several clients, and in some cases I thought they did and they didn't, and in other cases I thought they didn't and they did.
The general rule of thumb, if you speak to the Information Commissioner, is if you are storing information electronically, they would like you to be registered.
And it doesn't cost that much. I think it says it's £35.
£35 by direct debit, or £40 if you pay it one-off, for the smaller organisations.
Which I think is actually reasonable.
It's reasonable compared to the fines that they might issue. So they went on a campaign a couple of years ago, and they looked at all for companies. So they looked at everyone registered on Companies House and compared it to their own register. And anybody who was active, who was in Companies House, who was not registered with them, was written to, and they were asked to explain why they didn't need to register with the regulator for data protection, or register. Right. And if they didn't do either, they were fined £400.
And that's just as a one-off. And then if they had needed,
and then they still had to register as well. So again, so for the sake of £40 a year, for example, if you paid it sort of like on an invoice type of basis for £40 a year, if you're processing or you're dealing with personal data of service users, your clients, that sort of thing, then it's not really the biggest expense that you'll incur, and it just keeps you safe and on the right side of the legislation.
And can you explain the difference between a data processor and what's the other one? I always
Controller.
A data controller.
Yeah.
Because I always get those a little bit confused in my
Okay.
own mind as well.
Yeah. So a data controller, or a controller, as it became known in GDPR, is the organization or the person. So for example, like I'm a controller for my business, but the organization usually is that decides what information we're going to collect, how it's going to be used, how long it's going to be stored, whether it can be shared. So they make those decisions. So that's the controller. And basically it's because you control the information, if you think of it that way. A data processor is somebody that you may be outsourced to. So maybe you outsource your finances, like charities may do to yourself.
Yeah.
So you, beyond profit, would be a processor on behalf of the charities. So they may be sharing some personal data details, maybe of staff, if it's wages or something like that. Yeah. And then they're asking you to process that information on their behalf. Now, if you're a data processor, or you're going to engage a data processor, the controller, the organization making the decisions, needs to tell the processor what they want them to do. They need to give them clear instructions. And that's where a little agreement or a little contract or something comes in place. And it's basically something has to include, aside from the legal agreement stuff, has to include, no, we're going to share staff details for you to undertake payroll once or every month. And at the end of our contract, we expect you to retain the information you need to retain by law, but return the rest of the data to us. But you're giving them clear instructions. You're going to do payroll for us. And that means that they are going to process the information you share with them for that reason only.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, so controllers control the information, decide what's going to happen to it. Processors use the information, process it on behalf of somebody else.
So in the instance of Beyond Profit is a controller for some parts of our information.
Yep.
But we're a processor
for your clients.
Yes.
Yes.
That makes sense. Thank you for clearing that up.
So for a lot of smaller charities, when you're maybe collecting service user data and things like that, information like that, or client data, you are a controller for that client data. You're collecting it, you're deciding what you need to be able to deliver the service to them.
Yes.
Yeah. So you're a controller. And then when they ask you to do the payroll, they're then making you a processor on their behalf.
That makes perfect sense. Is there anything else you think would be useful for charities to know about, or just perhaps think about?
I think just think about as well. We've mentioned about sort of like why you've got the information, so why, what, where, sort of why you've got it, where you're going to keep it, what you're going to do with it. Think about how long you need to keep it for, but also think about if one of your members of staff or a service user comes along and says, can I have a copy of my information? They have a right to do that. A subject access request, they have a right to do that. They have a right to ask to be forgotten as well. There's 8 rights, but they have the key one that most people know is a subject access request. How are you going to deal with it? How are you going to handle that? So you need to know where your information is. That's handy. So you know where to go and look. So always know what information you've got and where it's stored, and that'll help you. How are you going to deal with a request if somebody comes in and makes a request? So you need to think about that. And also, if for any reason it doesn't go right, if there's an incident, or if we accidentally send an email to somebody that we shouldn't have done, or there's a breach, to call it a data breach. So if we've got something like that, how are we going to deal with that? What are the steps that we're going to do with that? Now, for a data breach, you can go on the Information Commissioner's website. There's again a self-assessment thing about whether it needs to be reported. You go through some questions, because there is a time limit to report if there's a big breach. But otherwise, it's just thinking about how we're going to do it. And the first steps for if it's an incident, if it's one, maybe a low volume, so it's only maybe one email's gone to the wrong person, is how quickly are we going to deal with it? What can we do to recover from that? What can we learn going forward? Make sure we check the name in the email address, but also, how are we going to tell the individual whose information it is that we sent out wrong? Are we going to tell them? Are we going to say but the first thing I always think is apologize. apologize because we've done something wrong. We're very sorry. This is what we're doing to sort it out.
And I think everyone makes mistakes. We're only human after all. And it's very easy when you're doing emails to accidentally type the wrong thing.
Autofill.
Autofill, great in some ways, not so great in others.
I think people don't realize as well with autofill, if you start to type a name and it comes up and maybe two people, like two Emmas come up, you can actually delete the one that you don't want anymore. Out of the autofill, you can just click on the end of the name and delete it.
That's really useful to know.
So then you're reducing the risk a bit more. Sort of thing. So autofill honestly causes more problems than enough.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Deb, for talking to me today. As always, it's great to talk to you because I think data governance it's scary. It can be scary. It shouldn't be, but it can feel scary. So I think
if anybody working with information thinks about how would I like my own personal information to be handled, take that approach. You don't want to just shared and put out in the big wide world for everyone to read, maybe. So just think about that, and that'll help to give you some ideas about how you can protect it, how you can make it secure. So take that.
That's a great tip. Oh, thanks, Deb. I've really enjoyed speaking to you today.
Thanks, Ash, for asking me.
You're welcome. I'll speak to you again soon.
Take care.
Bye.